Hello, I'm Danielle.
Craig.
We're from South Star. We're so excited to have Sally Ann here today and Joan Westenberg. Now, Sally Ann is the CEO of Cicada Innovations, which is Australia's home of deep tech. Sally has also been an executive program manager at Google. Now, you were in that role for 12 years, I believe, amongst being an incredible contributor to our national and global startup ecosystem, and having joined us at South Start previously. So welcome, Sally Ann. Now interviewing Sally Ann today is also the incredible Joan Westenberg. Now Joan is the founder and creator of Studio Self, alongside being the head of content at Linktree, amongst many other incredible things as well, and also holding a pivotal role in our startup ecosystem.
Thank you, folks, and peace to everyone on the call. Just want to start by acknowledging, basically whenever we do these Zoom calls, we're fragmented and we're scattered across the country. But I want to highlight that we are all still living on Aboriginal land, always was, always will be. And so I want to acknowledge the elders past and present and future. Right now, I am on the land of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge the land where we are. I'm excited about the call today. I want to sort of take a big deep breath, let the morning go. If you've been caught up and you've been stuck doing a bunch of million things, running around all your task management things, answering Slack messages, take a breath. We're going to spend some time together. It's going to be really nice. It's going to be really chill. And we're going to just talk. Have a really wonderful time. I'm here with Sally Ann Williams. Sally Ann and I go way back. We worked together at Fishburners way back when, and that was a fun time. We've done so many different things since then between the two of us, but right now we're going to be talking about the year that's been and where our lives and work have kind of wound up. So Sally, welcome. It is great to have you here.
Thank you, Joan. I'm excited. And this is like, it took a pandemic for us to catch up, and we're doing it publicly. So, I mean, hey.
It has honestly been like that for me this whole year. I'm having one-on-one calls and catch-ups with people I've been meaning to meet for years. And I just haven't done it because going into the city for coffee and coordinating things is just so hard,
Yeah. I think it's been a year where we've kind of gone from breadth to depth really quickly, and like an overnight forced transition. It's a really good engineering forcing function. And I actually have to say, I'm not going to lie, I'm kind of loving it. I do love to get out there and meet people and hang out and socialize in large groups, but the quality of conversation, and I think the fact that we're all in the same page and the same boat, has just meant you've been able to go deep with fewer people, but also go to a greater depth than what you would probably do if we were catching up normally. I mean, actually, no, you and I probably would be fearless and frank, to be honest. But
a bit like that.
But sometimes with deeper conversations with people, you still hold something back. But I think with being in a shared situation, which we're all living through it together, and all with different degrees of impact, right? Like the impacts on each of us is very, very, very different. And I want to acknowledge that, that I'm in a real position of I feel like of privilege. It's still hard for me, but I have a home and I have work. And so, that is a privilege in a pandemic in a lot of ways. But there's just a real care for people that I see coming through, and nearly every conversation starts with and as we did before the webinar started, was, how are you? And it's not a, how are you? It's like, no, how are you? Like, are you doing okay? And even when you're meeting people for the first time in a business context, this how are you, I think, has been very genuine, very heartfelt, and quite deep. In ways that you wouldn't normally do if you were meeting somebody at a conference. So I got to say, that's a good thing. And I've already sidetracked the conversation.
It's impossible to sidetrack this conversation because we're just going to talk about the things that get us passionate and the things that we care about. Can I ask, do you think that this year has seen kind of a resurgence in empathy?
I think it has. I think it's done something else though. I don't think it's just empathy. I think it's empathy and proactivity. And what I mean by that is, it's one thing to empathize with somebody. It's another thing to do something about it. It's really easy to empathize with a tweet or with something on Facebook, and you like, or you follow, or heart, or +1, smiley face, frowny face, or whatever. That's nice. That is a measure of some degree of empathy or expressing something to somebody. But what I've been really impacted by is seeing people start social movements where there's been printed cards that you could go and leave in the letterbox of your entire street and be like, do you need to self-isolate? Are you having to distance yourself? I will go, because you've got a health condition or what have you, don't have to tell me, I'll go do your groceries for you. I'll come and help you with this. I'll pick up the phone and I'll call you. I'll come and do something with you. That sort of action, to me, that's empathy in action. And I think seeing that I'm more excited about, because I do think that we've had a trend for a number of years with social media in particular that has really pushed people to think that their actions on social media are really good expressions of empathy in action. And they're okay, they're a start, but empathy in action for me is going that extra mile and going, how do you serve the people around you who need that service right now when you're able to? And how do you also receive that when you recognize you need it too? Because it isn't something you can't just keep giving out if you can't receive as well. So I see a lot more of that in community, and that for me personally excites me, because that means we're actually starting to think differently about ourselves in the world, and maybe, just maybe, we're thinking about others a little bit more. So
maybe we're starting to separate people who talk the talk from people who walk the walk. Folks who are just willing to express empathy or express something, and then folks who actually go out there and do the work. I think extrapolating from that this year is also going to see some of that happen in startups in the tech ecosystem as well. We are going to separate the people who are just talking the talk from the people who are really wanting to build something and innovate. There may be a chance to filter out some of the would-be entrepreneurs who are all hat and no cattle. Do you think that could be true?
Yeah, look, I think it's an interesting reflection, and I do agree with you. I think that there's a lot of people that have probably seen startups and the burgeoning, sort of the growing ecosystem over the years as an opportunity for them to make money and to provide products and services. And some of those things are great. Some of those things maybe not so much. And so now is when the quality bar really matters. And if you're there for somebody, you're not just there to do a job, you're really there through thick and thin, and you help them out. And I see that's a really different kind of perspective and attitude. And I notice it here. I notice it with our founders and our startups and how we work with them, but I also notice it with the businesses that we work with, the providers that we have. There's this genuine care of like, I'll just help you with this thing right now because I know that you're struggling. And so we've been able to do some things where we've been able to help people and just work through that and go like, we'll worry about it in 6 months. Let's just revisit the conversation in 6 months because we know that you're not in a position to have that conversation now. And so it's an interesting journey. I do think it's a really challenging one, though. I think there's a lot of other people out there who have been at the cusp of their business taking off, and all of a sudden, because it's been in an industry that's completely affected, whether it be hospitality or business or travel related, they're really struggling and maybe haven't found the way to transition and find that extra revenue stream and extra revenue source, which is really, heartbreaking to see. And I really do hope they have good advisors and mentors and a community around them who can help them navigate that and see a pathway forward. I think though there's the other group, which is kind of most of the founders behind sort of me and in our space here, because we're deep tech, our pathways to market are so much longer than sort of the more general tech end. We're talking 20 to 30 years for most of these companies to bring a product or service to market because of the scientific or the engineering underpinning of it and the clinical trials and the regulatory pathway. But because they're in health and food and clean energy and things that are problems that haven't changed or haven't disappeared, it's been really interesting to have them sort of going along and just chugging away, almost business as usual, but just in a COVID safe framework, and having to care for mental health of their staff in maybe another way or in a greater degree than what they've done. So yeah, it's been an odd start to the year, but I think personal sacrifices aside and personal challenges aside, because people are personally being impacted by COVID if they've lost a loved one and have unfortunately been sick themselves. I think there's some lessons that we're going to learn out of this on the other side that will make us a better community. I hope.
I hope so too. And I hope we get a little bit closer to the real meaning of community. You know, we
Yeah.
use the word so flippantly these days, oh, it's a social media community, that kind of thing.
Mm.
But a real community is a supportive circle of
Mhm.
people who really care about each other, and hope we can get closer to that.
Yeah, I agree. And I think we maybe need to rethink community too. We've always thought community about size. For me, it's about depth, right? Is your community, do you have that subset, and maybe it's a subset of community, but do you have that core group of people that, you know, you've got your little WhatsApp or what have you, and when the shit hits the fan at 2 a.m. in the morning, you can message them, and you know that in the morning when you wake up or when you check back later, there's going to be half a dozen offers of help and support. And so do you have a community that you can ask for help when you're vulnerable and in the hardest places? Because that's pretty hard to do. So that speaks of high degree of psychological safety. And two, can you offer help when somebody needs it? And for me, finding those sub pockets in the community, I'm fortunate I did that before COVID, and it's been such a lifeline and a blessing to me during it to have my little smaller group, particularly of women who, in my space, women in STEM, who we've got some really interesting and challenging problems, and to be able to be open and transparent and vulnerable with each other and trust each other enough to have the conversations that we've had has been game changer for me emotionally, and I think also professionally too. So it's been great.
Just on the professional personal challenges for this year, would you be comfortable sharing any plans or ideas that you had that got derailed by the events of the past 9 months?
Oh, absolutely. I'm always comfortable talking about the challenges. And I'll say there's a reason for this. I really believe in authenticity as a leader. And I also believe in vulnerability as a leader. Now, that doesn't mean I'll tell everybody every great detail about my life, but I don't think it is weak to be vulnerable about the things that you've felt have been challenging. I think it's actually a great sign of strength to be able to talk in the midst of that challenge and walk through it, because, you know, everyone goes through challenges. No one is immune from that. For me, for us at Cicada Innovations, we had our year well planned out. We had our strategy in place. We were ready to go. We had a whole series of physical and face-to-face events and engagements and capacity building programs that were all planned. Obviously, all of that has gone to the wayside, and it had to be done in the midst of one of our largest programs, the Medical Device Commercialization Training Program, the core program. We had to turn virtual after the first week for all of those participants. But to be honest, it's actually been, while that was really, really hard, and I will say for my team, one, shout out, they did the most amazing job doing that and picking it up. But two, I think it was actually really good for them. So I come from this sort of, you know, ex-Google background in engineering, where we're sitting there and virtual is the norm for me. So being on Hangouts or Zoom calls or what have you all day just feels very familiar. It's not a steep learning curve. Online first is my natural sort of happy state. And to come to an organization last year where face-to-face is everything, was refreshing, but also, you know, it's really hard to challenge that custom and that behavior. And so I actually think this transition has been good, not just for us as a team, but also for the entire community. And, you know, the teams hit the ground running. So they've pivoted everything to online, but they've also had, because there's a couple of things that we'd planned to do, really big engagements and events, our Emerge Festival and things like that. Because all of that had to be parked to the side, we had a moment to be able to stop and to pause and to kind of really reevaluate what was going to add significantly to the community and to the businesses that we support, and what was maybe fluff and would be nice to have. And so this real skill and ability in reflection and prioritization and strategy is something that I see having been developed in my team in spades during this period, like just so much depth that they've gotten that. And I think that's terrific. It doesn't mean that it's, you know, it hasn't been without its challenges, but that transition from what we thought we were going to do and then really kind of rigorously analysing, not just, well, should we move it online, but actually, well, why are we doing it anyway? And asking ourselves the tough questions and being willing to let quite a few things go and go, well, let's just kill it. There's no reason, there's no purpose, there's no ROI for that for us or for anybody else. So let's not waste our time on it. Let's put our time into things that are going to provide value to people and real value to them, and do fewer things better and stronger. And so it's been a good learning curve in that. I would say though that the really big challenges have been about the depth of relationship building that we were planning on doing at a global level has been, it's taken a while for the rest of the world or some parts of the world to catch up with being ready to go on that. And we're starting to see that now. So it's been a mixed bag.
Yeah, absolutely. Just thinking about, you mentioned communicating and how you're used to communicating in this way, in this technologically focused way, but are there any ways that communicating has changed for you this year, the way you connect with other people?
Yeah, I think for me, there's been a couple of things. I think if I think about it in first as my team and the perspective we have here, we've moved from having weekly team meetings to me sending most of my team home and a core group of us staying here to keep the building open for our companies and our businesses, because so many of them are producing things for COVID. To having to go, how do we connect in a really good way and make sure we're maintaining to connection when we're not in the same room together. So functionally bringing in some of the things that I used to do with daily stand-ups and, whips and things like that. But in all of those, in building in all of those sort of process-orientated practices, we would start most mornings with that genuine, first of all, with that question of how are you? What's going on for you? And before I would ask anyone on the team, I would tell them how I was. So I'd be like, I'm not gonna lie to you guys, today is not a great day. Today I woke up and it's all overwhelming. I have no idea how to make all the decisions I have to make. I have no data to make them on. And this is pre-lockdown. So it was when, lots of people were sending people home from work, but government hadn't made decisions. And I'm like, I can't pull the manual off the, Harvard Business Review shelf because there's no manual for how do you make decisions about this. And I'm making decisions for me and the 40 to 60 companies in here and about 450 people. And I'm like, I have no roadmap for that and there isn't one. So this is really hard for me. So team, I'm struggling today, but I'm here and we're going to get through it together. So how are we all good? And, we would start meetings off sort of like that. And some days it was good and some days it was bad. But I think it was really important to communicate to my team that I'm not always going to be strong and it's okay. And neither are you. And that's okay. Like if you need to take the time, go take it and come back stronger when you are refreshed. And so for me, that's been a really big change. I'd say the other thing is that actually having other people get comfortable with online communication. I think people shied away from Zoom or Teams or, Hangouts because they thought that they're uncomfortable with the technology or didn't think they could get the depth out of that as what you can as a face-to-face meeting. And so I've pretty much started every single meeting I've had, whether it's with somebody for the first time and I'm meeting them for the first time or I'm meeting them for the 100th time with that same question. How are you? How's things in your part of the world? And it's been an icebreaker in a whole new way because people have been willing to be vulnerable with each other. And so for me, I think just leading with vulnerability and authenticity in a greater way has been probably the lesson that I've hopefully taken forward in this and will continue to do so. I think I think it's definitely something I try and spend more time on.
In the spirit of that vulnerability, how are you doing today?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm actually doing okay today. Actually, no, I'd say I'm doing good. I'd say I'm actually doing good today. Yesterday I got in the car and I was asking myself the question, oh my goodness, can I do this? There's a few things I had on my plate and I was like, just don't know what decision I need to make there. But we got through it. And today I woke up and I was excited about what was on my plate and on the agenda and, excited that it was an opportunity to come in and see people in our community and hear what's going on in their business and being able to celebrate them and share a win with them. And there's something about celebrating other people and being excited with them. I think that just, I get my cup fills from doing that. So
yeah.
How are you?
Honestly, I'm doing a little better today than I was yesterday. I've started doing this thing with some of my friends in a WhatsApp group chat, where instead of asking how are you, we started saying where are you at out of 10 today? You know, with 1 being really low and 10 being top of the world, because sometimes it is hard to just say I'm not doing so well, and it's easier to give a number. Today I think I'm about a 7, which all things considered is not too bad.
What could I do to help you go from a 7 to an 8 today?
Well, I'd love some pastry. But apart from that,
I'm like ordering croissants.
love that. Honestly, just having the chance to sit down and take a break from work and have a chat with you is really helping. It's doing wonders for me.
That's
I love
good. I would say ditto likewise. And
Yeah.
like all these people that are out there just watching and what have you, I'm like, you know, after this is your call to action. Who's the person that's on your heart right now as I'm saying this that comes to mind? That first person, friend, family member, employee, employer. Right now, what I want you to do is take out your phone or write it on a bit of paper, put down their name and make a commitment to reach out to them. Text, WhatsApp, Facebook, if you're still on that, Twitter, email, call. Phone calls are great. Give them a call and check in on them and say hi and just say, I was thinking about you, wanted to check in. And
that's it, because this year, more than any, we don't need a reason to reach out to people. It can just be, I thought of you and I care, you know, and that's a wonderful, wonderful thing.
Absolutely. I agree. And, you know, why don't we do that more often? Because we're too busy.
We have a life these days that is designed to prevent us from really connecting with other people, because as long as we're focused on our work and on looking at ads on Instagram and on buying things and on hustling and grinding away, we can't actually, you know, affect change in the world. And sometimes I think the world has been designed to accomplish that, you know?
Well, definitely, I hate to tell you, but the device in your hip pocket or on your table or wherever that is, or for those of you out there multitasking right now, the science is in multitasking. No. And I'm sorry, ladies, even we are not multitaskers. There is no genetic predisposition to it. So, you know, put that dopamine hit away and, you know, look for something that's actually going to calm down the dopamine levels instead.
Completely. The best thing I've done all year is that I downgraded my phone from a big ass iPhone 11 Pro Max thingy to this tiny little iPhone SE with hardly any apps on it and a small screen. And it's just made me stop losing myself in my phone every 5 minutes. Best thing I've done all year.
Yeah, I've done similar things. I haven't downgraded my phone, but I've taken a lot of apps off it and I deliberately put it aside. But the other thing is each week I start the week with a couple of intentions, and it's like, what do I want to focus on that's going to make me a better leader, a better CEO, a better friend, a better wife, a better dog mum, a better whatever this week. And it comes down to things like, I can tell you what my 2 this week, I only had 2 this week. So this week I will nurture my body and my mind. And I have my 3 things: food, exercise, and reading, because I indulged over the weekend and I was like, this week I'm going to do some of this, and I will fully focus on one thing at a time. And, you know, I've had things like, you know, my husband and I have made things of like, we actually WhatsApp each other oh my God, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for sharing this, but anyway, I probably won't because he would. But, you know, we actually WhatsApp each other in the morning. What's the 1 or 2 things that we're committing to make our marriage better in the day?
I love that.
And so it's typically things around being present in conversation at dinner. And we have dinner at the dining room table now, not in front of the TV or not in the kitchen. We actually set the dining room table. And sometimes it's short because we've got to jump on other things. But just that intentionality and actually going, who do I want to be and how do I want to show up today? I think that actually is a game changer for what you can do in serving the communities that we're part of. And I keep using the word serving because for me, leadership is about service. It's about how do you serve others and enable them to be the best that they can be. Not about what's in it for me, it's about what's in it for we. And we only succeed if they succeed. So how do I give people a platform and give them space and place and be very intentional about that to help them? So
honestly, I think that's a really wonderful note for us to be finishing on, just the intentionality, because this year, with everything being so uncertain and not being able to tell where we're going to be this time next year, it's been so easy to lose ourselves in the day-to-day, and then lose ourselves in Netflix to numb it, and lose ourselves in whatever our distraction is. But if we can reach for that absolute intention and think mindfully about the actions that we're taking and the words we're using every day, I think that will really make a difference. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, my pleasure. I mean, hey, I fail at it a lot of the time, but I try and I keep trying, because that's what the whole point of failure is, right? You're going to fail 100 times at it, 1,000 times at it, but just keep trying at it. And if your intentions are in that direction, eventually you'll start to make the changes that help. And if I can help one other person, I've deserved my cup of coffee today.
Yeah. I've always believed that Yoda was absolutely wrong. You know, he said that you have to do or do not, there is no try. Fucking wrong. Trying is what matters. Trying is what makes all the difference in the world.
And do is the very definition of try.
That's it. Right there. Sally Ann, thank you so much for this conversation today and just taking this moment with me. I really, really appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you. And thank you for such a thoughtful and thought-provoking questions. My cup is full.
That is what I want to hear. We are going to jump over for a few more questions from some people here who have been burning to know the answers to some stuff. If I can remember how to make Zoom work with Q&A. Where is this Q&A button? It's not working for me.
I've got it.
You want me to dive in and ask them?
Yes, that'd be fantastic. Thank you.
Now we have Georgia asking, how important are ecosystem builders in gaining success for a startup? So what role do ecosystem builders play in that growth path?
Look, I'm going to be very possibly controversial of everything and nothing. So I think ultimately, if we're looking at what makes a startup successful, it is the team. And it's not just the founders, it's the team in that business. Ecosystem builders, and more broadly the community of people around that startup, so partners, friends, family, advisors, mentors, coaches, all of those people are important as well and really critical. But I'm an ecosystem builder. I don't want to big note ourselves and go, we're everything. We do play a role, and we play an important role and a significant role, but ultimately it's in support of those teams and the individual companies themselves. And I've been saying this quite a bit lately. There's that phrase that it takes a village to raise a child. It does take an ecosystem to help a startup thrive and survive. But that ecosystem includes, venture capital, it includes mentors, it includes legal advisory services, and in our case, IP lawyers, and a whole host of people. So it's not just people that would describe themselves necessarily as ecosystem builders.
I think on that, I might invite people to also think about the fact that when humans build an ecosystem, it's an artificial ecosystem. When we let it grow organically, then it's a real ecosystem. And I believe there's a thread there that we should follow.
I would agree with that, actually. Sorry, I'm going to pick up on that, because I think if I look at it, Cicada's been around 20 years. We have an ecosystem around us that has evolved organically with the work and the business over time. And so while we do ecosystem events and engagements and activities, it's about nurturing the ecosystem that's there. And if you think about a living environment or an ecosystem, you want to get all the balance of that in the right order. So you never want to have, in a wetlands ecosystem or a mangrove ecosystem, don't ask me how I know about mangrove ecosystems, that's a really long story. But in a mangrove ecosystems, you need to get the salinity right, you need to get the aquatic life right, you need to make sure that the stormwater runoff is at certain things. There's a whole bunch of things, and if you get any of those out of balance, there's a flow-on effect.
That's true.
Yeah, I love that.
So I've got a question here, which is one of my favorites that we've been asking a bunch of people, and it's kind of around that sort of Australia's superpower kind of motif. And it's what do you see as Australia's deep tech opportunity? And certainly in a turbulent year, what do you see on the horizon for the country, or where potentially, nationally, there should be maybe a stronger focus to play on the global stage?
Yeah, so I've talked about this a lot in the last couple of weeks, actually. So I think we actually have to have our moonshot moment, and we have to cast some long-term vision. So we have this incredible capacity in Australia for deep tech. The timeframes that we're talking, though, are not, 3 to 5 years. We're talking 10, 20, 30 years. And we have strengths in science and engineering, and in the opportunities in agriculture, in food, in energy, in medicine, and healthcare and well-being. That's not exclusive, but we actually have massive capacity and strength in that space. But we need to have a long-term view. And I think we need to sort of, what I'd love us to do is put some ambitious OKRs out there and go in 10 years time, we will be the leading expert on, pediatric cancer care, or we will be the global expert on Y, or we will be we will have the largest number of businesses, and I'm using businesses, not startups, because I want them to be businesses. I want them to be beyond that phase in agriculture, providing, food to the world, and, in a sustainable way that deals with soil salinity and water and things like that. And I think if we could create some vision, that would actually drive the transformational change that we need, because it's not just policy levers from a government setting. We've had a little bit in the budget in the last week, but it's also about how we as a nation see ourselves and how we start driving to behavior and decisions from a business perspective, from a community perspective of where we're going to put our stakes in the ground and just go out and solve some of these problems. So I'm incredibly optimistic and hopeful, which is ironic because most people would say to me I'm glass half empty more than glass half full the time, because I would describe myself as a pragmatic optimist. I know the roadblocks and the hurdles that we've got to get there and how hard it's going to be. But bloody hell, let's just put some stakes in the ground and say it. And it's almost like name it and claim it to get there, because we do need to drive towards it. And we have to have long-term vision and not be afraid of failing on it. But because if we have no vision, we'll end up just going to be doing these iterative little tiny baby steps forward. And now is our time. Pandemics, recessions, like the largest company, I got to tell you this story because this gets me excited, right? So living example, the largest resident in Cicada right now is a company called SpeedX. Now, SpeedX produce, they're a molecular diagnostics company and therapeutics. They produce a whole bunch of test kits, most recently for respiratory illnesses, and they've got a COVID strand in there, but also STDs and other things. And they also test for antibiotic resistance. So they deal with the super drugs. So not only do they tell you what you've got, but they tell you how it's not going to be treated and what you can do to treat it, right? This is a company that was founded at the back of the GFC. And it was founded when Johnson & Johnson Labs in Sydney shut down and 2 women were made redundant. And in that moment, they went, bloody hell, well, we've got something here. Let's give it a shot. There's never been a better time. Now, Ali, when she tells this story, she's beautiful. She's one of the most amazing women. I absolutely adore her. She'll tell you she started on the wrong side of 50. She absolutely started on the right side of 50. They are growing. They are thriving. They are selling to the largest labs around the world. But they started in a recession. They started off the back of a redundancy. How many people in this country are being made redundant right now? And I don't want to minimize that pain or how hard that is. Like, it is a really hard place to be. But we know humans are resilient. And if we can put the support that we need around people in the moment of this despair and dark times, this could turn into a massive opportunity for them and for so many other people around them. They have about 80 people here employed. They are doing manufacturing, doing multi-million dollars of orders. They're fulfilled here, manufacturing on site as well. So tick the box medtech, tick the box manufacturing 4.0, tick the box, or advanced manufacturing, they're doing all of that. They've got offices in Europe and the US, and they are just going crazy with hiring. So much so they want more space and I don't have it for them. This is the problems that we could see in 10 to 15 years if we really have the vision and we can articulate that as leadership out there in the community and the ecosystem, because who else might start doing things like that?
I think there's also something about the difference between a market opportunity and a market need. We've been in such a comfortable place with the tech ecosystem that we've been able to have what is it, like 7 different dog walking startups in Australia? Like, do we really need that many? Versus people who really take a moment to think about, what does the world need? What does the world facing climate change and all the associated disasters that are coming for us need? And I think if we really try to drill down into that and stop looking for a way to build a startup and start looking for a way to solve a problem, then we'll make some headway.
100% agree. Start with the problem, not with the business. And if you're looking for an impactful place and you go, I don't know what problem to solve, UN SDGs, there's like quite a few of them. And under every single one of them, there's at least about 1,000 significant problems to solve. And the best thing about that is if you address any one of those SDGs, you automatically have a massive market opportunity. So there is going to be a business opportunity on the other side of it, guaranteed, because they're not SDGs and they're not done by the UN, for no reason. They're there because they affect every single person on the planet and they need to be resolved. So I think if we can focus on the problems, and if reality check here too, for anybody out who's thinking maybe I'll start a business, you damn well need to be passionate about the problem, because you're going to be doing it for 10 to 30 years plus of your life. It's not going to be a 3-year journey or a 5-year journey. It's going to be long. It's going to be hard. There's going to be lots of ups and downs. You think COVID was rough? Well, making cash flow and making enough money to pay your staff is going to, week on week is a huge challenge. And so you need to be committed to the problem space. And I think if you can do that, that's a really good start and a really good way of looking at it.
Just if I could, just before we jump to the next question, I kind of wanted to do a tiny follow-up, because when we're talking about, the ambition for Australia and thinking about the moonshot ideas and what the long game is, which certainly is the world that you live in, I'd really be curious to understand what you kind of see as, what are the barriers to that, and the voices and the vision, like how do we get that to scale so that it actually is adopted? How do you see a strategy through that?
Yeah. So I think there's 2 parts to that, right? I think the voices and the adoption, we need to start speaking about it. Those of us that are in the ecosystem that you've heard me say this and you're like, yes, I agree. Great. Start talking about it. Get on the same page. Let's sing from the same, music sheet there and start talking the same language. And I think there's people out there that are, right? We see venture capitalists talking about this in the same space as what we do all the time. Main Sequence Ventures, Blackbird, there are others out there that have a same vision. They want to see some of the most pressing problems in the world solved. And they believe it's going to be through science and technology. And so they are starting to look to deep tech. I think we need founders to start to really articulate that too. I've got companies in here who doing amazing things, but they are still not making that leap to associate how this deals with health and well-being on that next level. Some are. Let me give you another example. So Kath and Claire from Loop Plus, they founded this amazing company. It helps people living in wheelchairs manage their health and well-being, and in a way that is preventative, and potentially keeps them out of hospitals with bed sores and complications and curvatures of the spine. Because what they've done is they've made this sensor pattern technology with a device, an app on your smartphone that basically replaces pain receptors in your bum, if I can be that blunt. A little bit more complicated than that, but I want to make sure that you all get this. It's really simple. But if you're living with paralysis and you're in a wheelchair, you can't tell that you lean 2 degrees to the left on that left hip bone, and that actually, if you do that for 16 hours a day, you're probably going to get a pressure sore that might see that you're in hospital. And you might also get a curvature of the spine that's also going to require other sorts of treatment. By doing what they're doing and putting their health back in the hands of the individual in that situation and allow them to live a healthy, productive life, that's a potential $2 billion cost saving to the healthcare system in Australia alone. $2 billion saved. So, part of the articulation needs to not just be what's the value to the company, what's the value to the individual user, but what's the value to society at whole, and what's the impact. And, we did this report recently, Australia's deep tech opportunity, and it was the Cicada Innovations story. And we looked back on 20 years, but we also looked kind of more broadly at deep tech. And one of the things that we saw was that actually for every $1 invested in a deep tech startup, $3 of value is returned to the community, to business, community, to users. It's actually not to the business itself. So when we start communicating this and we start talking about why these companies matter, and we start talking about the problems that they're trying to solve and what the impact is on a broader ecosystem, it's not just about their valuation, it's the value beyond valuation. and we make that value a priority in a narrative in our discussion, I think that's when we start to gain momentum about, you know, where people are going to invest in, what people are going to do, how they're going to think about and identify the problems they're going to solve. And we start to gain a bit of momentum in that. And then, of course, at the same time, you know, there's lots of us that both publicly but also privately are, you know, really making the case to government and say, this is the long-term future. We need to have a much more complex economy than what we have. We have a very basic economy right now. And if we don't raise the complexity level of the businesses that are, you know, foundational to the jobs and opportunity, we aren't going to ever come back into another era where we do have, you know, this growth period that goes on for what, 17 years longer, something like that. So I think those are the kinds of things that we need to think about and do. And it's, look, none of this is easy. There's no one single magic silver bullet. I mean, everyone's looking for that, but it's about a community. And again, it comes back to an ecosystem. If the ecosystem is thriving and we get all parts of it aligned and willing to do their piece in it, and also recognize what's their piece and what's somebody else's piece, that's when we'll start to get some momentum in this space.
Thank you.
Sorry, that was like a big long, and I was like,
thank you in the best possible way. Craig said, oh, we need to have a long conversation after this and put out a note. No, you are, yeah, incredible to listen to, and you can tell there's a wealth of experience behind that voice.
I don't know about that. I'm convicted of my sort of like my passion in this, because I think it takes a lot, it takes all of us together, right? I don't have all of the answers, but I really believe in the vision. And I think that's the thing we have to spend time on, is having a vision, because a vision is what drives people's behavior, and it drives culture, and it drives policy settings, and it drives business investment. And, you know, that vision needs to be something that everyone can buy into. And I think that's what we missed a little bit when, you know, Malcolm Turnbull was Prime Minister, is not everybody understood what it was about, and they couldn't see the impact for them. Like, if you're a kid growing up in the western suburbs of Sydney, what the heck did that matter to you? You know, but being able to translate that and show them the impact it can have, either because they're going to receive the benefits of some of the outputs of these companies, or because they see a founder that's done that and they can go, oh my gosh, that can be my pathway and my journey. And, you know, kids are always, you know, absolutely committed and passionate about problems. You know, you see them as little kids, they get fired up every time they learn something in primary school about hunger. They're like, well, that's just ridiculous, solve it. And, you know, like, we need to have that same level of vision and really articulate that we're going to run hard after these missions, and we're not going to stop until we solve it. And the first step and the first product might be elementary, right? But the longer, bigger vision is that game-changing thing. And sorry, I've got another story now, because I'm like, oh my God. So we have to tell stories, like, we have to be storytellers. But, you know, LumaChain, which is another resident company here, they got Main Sequence Ventures backings. Jamila is amazing. They do food provenance and tracking in agriculture, which is incredibly important, not only for people in, you know, for farmers and those out there that either livestock or grains or what have you around provenance and, you know, their living wages and things like that. But actually it has a bigger impact potentially down the line on modern slavery. And the biggest area of modern slavery is actually in food production. So those are they're the kind of people that we need to tell their stories. We need to unpack the big picture. We need to run hard alongside of them and wrap the support that we can around them and see that come to fruition.
What was the name of that company again?
LumaChain.
LumaChain. Would have heard Craig whisper that. And I think that leans into one of the questions we have here about your role as a mentor at StartMate. What have been some of your most memorable experiences in helping guide, you know, that next generation or older on their journey?
Oh man, I have to be honest, I'm probably the worst mentor in StartMate because I'm so slack. No, look, I always overcommit and say I'm going to be at everything, and then, you know, I've really struggled to be able to be at everything. But I think some of the best experiences I've had in StartMate program is, you know, I think it's when you learn as much from the recognition that you go into it as a mentor, but you actually learn as much as you give. And as much as you give somebody else, you actually learn so much from them if you go into it with that right attitude and that humility. My favorite moments have been getting into great debates as we're, you know, as mentors, as we're voting on who comes into the program. And I'm like, 100%, this one's going to knock it out of the park. And particularly, I remember one founder, and I'm not going to name names or years because it'll be too identifiable, but a founder that came in and half of them were like, we're on the fence. And we went, this person's got to come in. This is a game changer. But the reason they were on the fence is they didn't understand the market opportunity, and the market opportunity happened to address women. I happened to be one of the sort of people that would potentially use that market. And I was like, I want to buy this. I will like take my money now. So if you're not in, I'm like, we got to do something about this. So being able to actually, for me, actually going along with the other mentors and looking at that transition of how we determine who comes into the program, and breaking down some and demystifying some barriers around that is probably one of the things that I love the most about it. And I love the fact that everybody in that cohort of mentors and companies is so committed to actually trying to change the ratio for people and increase diversity of all kinds, not just through a gender lens in the long term. They're not, and everybody acknowledges is they're nowhere near where they want to be, but there's a commitment to it. So for me, that's probably my favorite thing, and it's an ongoing one. So I'll always enjoy it, and I'll always be the one that argues with people about things.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I wish I should really remember I'm being recorded.
Now, just the final question here. Why is having a community support you so much more important than depending on a single person?
So I'm going to give you a very engineering answer on this one. Single points of failure are always problematic, and you never ever want them, right? So when you're designing anything and any product or service, be it something online, be it a rocket ship to the moon, you always try and build in redundancy after redundancy after redundancy so that you don't have a single point of failure. So I think there's two problems with only having one person to support you versus a community or a group. One is that single point of failure. What happens when they're not there? They could be the most amazing support person in the world, but what happens when they're not there? And where do you go to for help? You need to have more people than that on your side, because it's bloody hard and it can be really lonely. I think the second thing is actually comes back to diversity. What happens if they're wrong? If you've only got one voice that you're listening to and you bank everything on that and you gamble everything on that, where does that leave you? And so that's always the challenge. A community doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get better information or higher degree of accuracy of advice or even better advice, but you're going to get more of it, and you're going to get a diversity of it. And you're going to get people's different learned and life experiences. And then it's up to you to filter that and to test it. And if you're only with one person and you're testing it, what are you testing it against? So being able to ask things of different people and test and validate that is incredibly powerful. So a community will always be more availability and more knowledge, and also a greater network. So I think one thing that we don't do as well in Australia that we should do is understand the networks that we have. So our networks are somewhat of our net worth. You know, who is it that you need access to? I might not have access to them, but I might know that they're, you know, Joan's best mate. And so I really like what you're doing. So I'll make an intro to Joan, and Joan will make an intro to them. So understanding who your network is and kind of really knowing how to leverage that in an appropriate way, and a respectful way, but, you know, like really leveraging the power of that to see our businesses thrive here, because I think there's incredible opportunity to be done in Australia.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel like, you know, it does take a village to raise a child, and at our hearts, we're all still children and faced with the enormity of the challenges that we have ahead of us.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I love your energy. On a personal level, like just, yeah, you have, you capture the screen, I would say the stage, but it's, yeah, we're living in that era at the moment. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you so much, Joan, as always, for facilitating this series. Joan, do you have any, kind of jumped into your Q&A slot there, sorry.
If anybody has pastries, please send them my way.
Thank you so much
Thanks.
for having me.
Thank you. Have a great afternoon, everyone.
Enjoy the rest of your week, everyone.